trees all the time. Yeah.
Live stream is rolling, and so whenever you're ready.
Okay. It's 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, May 1st, 2024, and I would like to call the first meeting of Harvard's Tree Board to session. So, so roll call. Do we just want to go around? Folks can introduce
Yeah,
themselves.
because it's not listed, so yes.
Okay.
please.
Joel Crete. Jay Wolf.
Shannon Kingzette.
Lisa Haderlein. So, thank you. So I thought the first thing. Okay, now it says there's no internet. It says I'm connected, but no.
Sometimes it takes a minute.
Okay, that's okay. So everybody should have a paper copy of the tree board ordinance, right? I was hoping I could just have it on the computer. That's so cool. So I thought it would be good, since this is our first meeting, to go over the actual ordinance. And I just have to point out, it's very exciting, that there is our Tree City US sign. So,
I was gonna wait till, so we also received our first plaque.
Very good.
so yay. Yeah, which is pretty cool. There are only a few towns in McHenry County that, there are only a few towns in McHenry County that are Tree City communities. So that's kind of nice to join the ranks of other communities that care about their trees. So, yeah. So, first of all, and the one person isn't here, Janet Hugg. I don't know, I didn't hear from her, but I assume something must have come up. So there is a sixth member of the board. So, did folks have a chance to review the ordinance info? Okay, good. I mean, I don't want to go through it. Okay. Okay, that's okay.
It actually addressed some of the questions I had already come up with on my own.
Oh.
It was already covered in there.
Okay. Oh, good. Good. Yeah, I mean, it seemed, I mean, when we put it together last year, Lou put it together. Lou's job before he came here was in Nebraska City, which is the home of the Arbor Day Foundation. So he had a little familiarity with the whole Tree City USA program, and did, once we brought it up, he did reach out and put in the application and help us, put an ordinance together. And yeah, so that's kind of exciting. But so what, as you read through this, what questions did you have? So Jay, sounds like you have a list.
Yes. And some of it is covered here. I noticed that there's two types of trees, large canopy trees and ornamental trees. And that was part of my question. And also the combination of the ornamental and large canopy. Are we going to, will there be a selection of both fast-growing trees and slower growth trees? Because we want the combination. We want to see some results in the next couple years, but we also want results 50 years. So is there going to be a concerted plan to make sure that we have some fast growth, some old, slow growth, and so on?
I think we have that opportunity. I mean, we get to set the guidelines according to this in terms of lists, tree lists, for planting, and also potentially helping the city get grants to replant parkway trees and whatnot. So I think that's completely under our purview, working in concert with our Public Works Superintendent. And Rob, I apologize. Do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Rob Lambs, Public Works Superintendent.
Now, what will be the source for these trees? Is the grant through the state of Illinois? Are we going to get them from the state of Illinois or private sources?
I think we should identify that within this.
Because I know the state of Illinois, as Rob probably knows, has a program for people just to buy trees and plant them. So I was wondering what is our source of these trees going to be? And then, does the grant money cover us, like say going to Stark Brothers or maybe going to Dennis Norton at Royal Oaks and getting trees from him? Or are we restricted to getting them through the Illinois State DNR?
Yeah, we don't have to get them through DNR. And currently, what do we do currently when the city is purchasing trees?
So right now, we have money set aside in the Public Works for trees. And to answer your question, with this, you can get either donations locally, you can go to the state, you can go to federal, as far as for grants. So you have a mixture of options. You're not limited in any way.
In terms of the source, I mean, I think up until now, the city's typically worked with Harvard Nursery.
Harvard Nursery?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, one of the local nurseries.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the things I would like to see us do, if we can get more of a program going, more of a plan, is to maybe bid out.
Yeah, and I think that's going to vary depending on our species selection and things like that. The more local we can stay, the better it's going to be long term. So.
For next year, the city has $25,000 budgeted for trees. However, that cost also includes hazard tree removal beyond public works capability. So if there's something near a power line or something near a house that could potentially cause liability of the city if the municipal public works crew takes the tree down or takes a limb, we will outsource that. I've reached out to Power in the past as well as AJ&R. Power's been really responsive lately and very affordable. We've had a couple incidents where I needed somebody quick, and he was right there, and his prices are very reasonable for what.
Which
Yeah.
is great.
Mm-hmm.
We have some sort of process of confirming insurance and stuff.
We
Just being named officially insured.
We right now, no. In the situations where we've had to take down hazard trees, it's just been for this last one we had at 2nd Street, where it, came down blocking the road. I made a couple quick phone calls, and the first one to respond was, hey, you got it, let's do it. What's your price? What do you estimate? And then I think they had it gone that day. So.
Some other things I would like to point out is that you also have, from time to time, Arbor Day will supply trees. And then kind of along your question, should, like a windstorm or something come through, when, let's say it's a tornado that comes through, you can also document the trees that were destroyed and then include that in your FEMA application for reimbursement. And that includes stump grinding and from hauling away the tree, grinding the stump, and then putting in a new tree. So all that, and they have calculation tables for it.
Does the Public Works then handle that task to record that information?
Right now, because we don't have, historically, this is our first time coming into a Tree City USA. So Public Works' responsibility as far as trees would be is it a hazard? Can we take care of it ourselves? And that's the extent of it. So we don't maintain a record of what species are where and, DBH, anything like that.
So there's no existing tree inventory or?
No.
Okay.
No, it was a low priority in the past compared to all the other needs of the city. Now, moving forward, one of the things, and there are, I believe, some grant dollars out there to even hire out, or you can get like interns to come out and GIS every tree that's in the city's public right-of-ways, the parks and so on, and then also try to identify, each of those trees so that we have a GIS location for everything. Now, granted, that's going to take time to get the entire city done.
Right.
But now that we are, this is the direction we're going regarding trees, it's something that in our plans as we do budgets moving forward to try to incorporate.
Well, and I did just want to comment that, because it's number 6 on the agenda, but upcoming grant opportunities, there's a Trees Forever grant opportunity. Deadline is June 1st, and it's up to $25,000 for doing a tree inventory for your community. And it's specifically to communities that are considered underserved, low income.
So that will help us figure out
Environmental.
where we need to put the trees
Yes.
and get a.
So it'll tell us what we have. It'll give us our baseline of what is here now for all of our public trees.
Does that go into like a tree keeper? So then we have access to that. So as trees are removed, Public Works can.
I believe so. I think if
Manage
that's
that
what we
and-
want it to be.
Well, that would be
Right.
like a,
Yeah.
kind of a sidebar, the trees downtown, they got pulled out.
Yeah.
What was the issue there?
So the trees downtown have to get pulled out every so often because of the size. Once they become too big for that tree box, then it becomes a hazard. They start growing into the electrical. The idea, from what I was told, was the initial idea was to sort of use the downtown area to get the trees established and then replant those trees throughout the city once they reach a size that they're becoming a hazard. However, removing a growing tree that's probably somewhere around 10 to 12 years old is another issue that's easier said than done. So typically in the past, they've tried removing them, then end up with trunk damage, and then, you end up,
Can't get the scoop in there.
Yeah, you end up-
Otherwise, you're manually pulling it out, and
Yeah,
that's
and-
just not gonna end well.
if you grab it with a chain or a rope or anything like that, you end up girdling the tree, and then all your stuff was for naught.
Well, they're not great trees.
No,
begin with.
so prior to this year, and Lou and I have talked about this, was that the only tree that was planted on air was honey locust.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything for diversity, and it makes a monoculture that if we have a situation where we get some sort of, a Dutch elm or emerald ash borer, that we end up losing every tree downtown. Lou and I have discussed it, and we've decided that, it'll
Item
be.
3 on my list.
Yep, it'll be sort of
Diversity.
at my discretion for what goes in there. We've already talked about, down in the streetscape, the possibility of doing, some river birch or some flowering trees, something.
Ornamental cherry trees.
Yeah, something that provides a little diversity, something that provides a little bit of
Like right now, the
something
cherry
different.
trees are in bloom. Apple trees are in bloom. And they have the ornamental cherry trees that don't fruit, so you don't have the fruit mess to deal with.
Right. So.
The other thing, too, is that as the city progresses in some of its projects, like there has been talk about trying to get this one empty lot downtown to make into a park. One of the ideas is to, or one of the goals during that is to incorporate tree growth in that area as well. So, we've talked
That would be nice,
about-
because that's actually why I can't be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, is because I do Aikido over there at the dojo that's right next to the lot.
So, so other city projects, as we like a walk path, bike path, as we start to do some construction, one of the goals is to, or one of the side goals is to incorporate some vegetation as well, namely trees.
Like the town just off 47, they've got a couple areas between buildings where they've set up a little park. They got some benches and some gas-fed fire pits and stuff that are constantly on and stuff. Something like that.
Sure.
Well, I just thought it was you could tell it was an empty lot, and they did something with it.
Right.
They put some benches and a little path and stuff, and did something with it.
Right. And going to a comment you made earlier, with some of the parks, particularly like Milky Way Park, there's not a lot of shade trees, which are faster growing trees. So that's something to incorporate. So as we grow, and this is all kind of a learning process as between the city and the tree board, we'll kind of find our way.
So I think the duties are pretty clear for the tree board, but we can just go through them. And in here where it refers to the director, that's our public works superintendent. It's not defined, but that's who that is. So coordinate and promote Arbor Day activities. Arbor Day was last Friday. They don't have to be on Arbor Day.
No, they don't. In what we've done in the past, or in previous communities, is to have something either on Friday or Saturday of Arbor Day, depending on when it falls. And then that's something too, to even reach out to, like, say, Harvard State Bank or some other local business or organization to see if they want to donate a tree.
Yeah.
And then try to gather everybody up to celebrate it.
And then to have, and that's, the next part is review and update 5-year plan to plant and maintain trees on city property. And so that'll be nice to have, sort of work that Arbor Day tree planting event into actually a plan for where we're putting trees, and why. Support public awareness and education, review Rob's concerns relating to tree care in the city, submit an annual report, and assist with annual application for Tree City USA, which is an annual application, just to confirm for the Arbor Day folks that we're still doing what we said we were doing. And then they have opportunities to like step up your certification to a different level. Here, Jay, is one of your questions, recommend a list of tree species for planting on city property and a list of prohibited species. And then presenting a plan annually to the city for taking care of our trees. So,
And this is more for our viewers out there, and people who watch this, down the road. Keep in mind that the emphasis here is on city property, not private property.
correct. And so the, excuse me, so we were talking a little bit about the tree inventory grant opportunity, and that would be getting an inventory would be a really great piece of information to have as a basis for a plan, for a 5-year plan, is knowing where the trees are and what they are, and
And the condition.
condition, yes.
With that grant, do they provide analysis of it, or is it just the?
My understanding is it's what we spec out, and then, they'll fund up to 25,000. So, yeah, for 25,000, yeah. So I think, that's going to be key, is for us to say, okay, what information do we want, and then finding, what that is going to be.
From the
It's gonna
time that
cost.
grant is approved, do they have a time frame of when
I don't know. I'm sure they do, but yeah, I didn't get that far into it. The application's due June 1st. Yeah, and I don't know offhand what the timeline is for them approving it and then for the work getting done. Yeah, I mean, when would you typically, as Shawn and Shannon are both arborists, so when would something like that typically
it can be
occur?
done any time of
Okay.
year? I think they're
Okay.
a little bit more effective if the trees,
Okay,
they're not. They can
Especially
still
if
be
you're
done in the dormant
right.
months, but
okay,
for condition rating, it's helpful to see the canopy.
okay.
the reason I ask is because then all next steps are or many next steps are determined by results of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's other things that can be done before that,
Right.
tree species list, but even knowing, it's hard to pick what trees should be planted until you know
What you
what
have.
you already.
What we have,
Yeah.
and then we have to do the math. I mean, we're gonna have to, as, like an à la carte menu, we're gonna have to choose, okay, how many ornamental, how many shade, and
That's gonna vary depending on what part of the
Exactly.
community you're in.
like
too.
as we know now, downtown, obviously it's gonna have to be dwarf,
Yeah, I mean,
ornamentals.
definitely some smaller trees. And for us in Public Works and for street decorations and things, having either dwarf species or, something that's, even maybe take some of those spaces and put, some shrubs or something like that where you can have a little bit of ground cover, you can have something in the canopy, just a good mix.
Just a question out of curiosity, when those trees are pulled out from downtown, where do you end up putting them?
Into the chipper.
You don't
can't-
you don't try to replant?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I only
yeah.
ask because if it's
I
replanted,
was thinking maybe burn pile.
because if that's the case, one of the things to keep in mind for this board is when trees are determined to be downtown, it's in 5 to 10 years, where do you want them to go?
Yeah. So, I
that
mean,
there's a plan.
Getting them out in one piece, Rob
yeah,
commented on.
if that would be the goal, and I don't know if there's, when those boxes were put in, I don't know, I don't think that there are sides to them. So there's no bottom, there's no sides, so the roots grow beneath, so, the staff ends up, basically hacking away at the root ball and just causes all sorts of damage if we were to try to remove it. Ideally, it would have been built in a box where the roots couldn't extend, but then it would be root bound. It's sort of a catch-22.
Well, and the cost to manage that tree after transplant at a larger size is not, the cost benefit is not typically there either, so I think that's something to be mindful of.
Is there a time frame of when we think those parkways would be redesigned? When was that last?
I think that was done in the mid 2000s, 05-ish,
Yeah, I was gonna
possibly,
say
maybe
about
a little.
20 years ago.
Yeah, maybe a little earlier than that. Right now, to do this single block between Park and Washington was $650,000. So I don't think there's going to be a redesign of that area.
Putting a vault in to hold the tree would be nice, each tree, but that would be some crazy money versus just
Yeah.
letting it root.
Well, and I don't think the cost benefit is there for
Right.
that
Right.
either.
You can create, like you say, sort of vault-like situations and have it so the roots can run parallel. So you put a block on one curve, put a block to the inside, and then you have it so the roots can run
Right.
down the block. If it doesn't get infrastructure, then you can drastically extend.
Yeah,
life of
but the issue with
trees.
that is the time, when it comes time to relocate the tree, we would run into the same issue.
You don't have to relocate the tree. Instead, you let that tree. How fast are you rotating?
Oh, 20.
Every 10 years or so as needed.
So if you could get 50 years out of that tree because of the design of the parkway, you don't have to do anything.
Right.
Now, if you're also choosing things that aren't going to be a maintenance,
Well, I
everything
mean-
has maintenance, but as much of a maintenance as best you can.
I mean, most of your dwarf ornamentals, 15-year life expectancy for most of them, 15 to 20 depending.
Probably. And I'm-
Aesthetic,
yeah.
Because that's what I have a lot of ornamental cherry trees and stuff, and they have the window that they produce in and stuff, but about a 15-year max.
So if you could get, modest-sized shade trees.
Right.
So like a medium-sized tree that had a lifespan of 50 years. It would change the
Appearance.
the appearance of the downtown, to soften the space with mature shade trees, keeping in mind maintenance and other concerns. But if you can extend that, it's spending money more efficiently, but also enhancing the downtown area. If you think of, what are some of your favorite downtown areas, Woodstock Square is an example. That's the nature of that community is the square, and we recreate, it doesn't have to be Woodstock Square, but recreate something that.
Well, yeah, that's always been our bane. We've got a linear space as opposed to a square.
Hi, Janet.
Any parkway, linear spaces like that are difficult with trees. But if you go to downtown Chicago or.
Seven, I'm
there are
sorry.
large
You can
Right.
take
Come
your
on
seat
on
somewhere
Michigan
up there.
Okay.
They have a lot more money to create the vaulted spaces down there, but you can get 30, 40, 50 years out of a tree in a downtown park setting. But it's not easy. It takes a lot of money to redesign it. Maybe it's not worth it.
And
12 is maybe fine.
And the other challenge that we have is, like you said, with having sort of that, essentially the box that these are placed in, we don't have any green space anywhere around them. It's all, compacted soil and base gravel, and, it's just about the worst conditions for a tree.
That's okay. It's still, it's nicer to have a green tree
Yes.
than nothing.
Yes.
Like even if it's, even if you have to rotate it, I think the benefit still exceeds the headaches.
Well, and having that natural shade really makes a difference. Yeah.
I always worded it like this: if you're in a parking lot and it's 100 degrees in the summer, where do you park your car?
Yeah, right.
You try to find
Spot next to the
underneath
tree.
that poor
Yep.
miserable honey locust.
Locust with the fragrant sumac growing under it.
There you go.
But that honey locust has a lot of value when it's 110
Yes, it does.
degrees and you're looking for a cool spot to park.
So let's just take a moment. Janet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm so sorry. I had it on my calendar for 7 o'clock for some reason. But I'm Janet Hugg. I live here in town. Been in Harvard about 15
Want to
years.
bring the mic down?
Microphone, yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I've Janet Hugg, and I've lived in Harvard about 15 years, like you say, a newcomer. I'm always been involved in city activities, and was on the events committee for several years. And I'm a member of the Harvard Garden Club, and also a big supporter of the Land Conservancy, a member of that. And
Thank you.
And I came with a lot of questions, so I hope we haven't gone past my
No, we're
opportunities.
just looking at the ordinance, which there's a copy of it behind the agenda.
Yes, I
there.
have. I
Okay.
actually read through it. That's
good,
where my
good.
questions are.
And we were just looking at the duties, so at the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2,
Okay.
and talking a little about, and we got into talking about the downtown trees and
Okay.
what happens with replacing those. And
Okay. Well, let me ask something about
Sure.
that area. It says review and update a 5-year plan. So there is a 5-year plan, or we are going to make it? Because it said
we'll make
review.
we will make
Okay.
a 5-year plan, yes.
All right.
And so, just so you know, one of the things we talked about is there's a grant that's available to, for funding to do a tree inventory for the community.
Mhm.
And so, that would sort of be the key piece of information, is to know what we have, the species, the condition, location of all of the public trees in town as the basis for then putting a plan together.
Okay. And have we received a tree city designation yet?
Yes.
We have. Oh, okay. That was another question,
We've
because
got
it said
this
something about to
side.
renew, and I said, well, do we have it yet? And I don't know if you've gotten to number 7 yet. Are you there yet, or past that?
The tree species list.
Oh, the tree species list.
Okay, well,
So-
are we going to develop this list, or is there already one? I'm just wondering, prohibited species, does that exist already?
No.
Okay,
So maybe this will help, is we're pretty much starting from scratch.
okay. Yeah, some of this wording sounded like it was already in place, and I was a little confused, because I thought we were
Right,
creating it.
yeah. It's sort of aspirational.
Okay,
The city does have a approved species list as far as trees go, but it's maple, 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 maple.
okay.
And oak.
I don't think oak's anywhere in there.
We
Sure.
have London plane trees in our subdivision.
I was going to say linden plane tree.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's Miyabi maples and
And, London plane trees.
Yeah, London
and,
plane tree's on the list.
We
yeah.
have a swamp white oak and a bur oak.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But it's limited.
And how many ash trees did you have? Oh, that's good.
Not too bad. A lot of locusts, a lot of linden,
Yeah.
a lot of Norway maples.
Okay, I guess I'm up to speed.
Hey! Other questions on duties?
Well, it's to be determined, species and everything. Once we
Right.
get a Google Earth map of what we
Yeah.
have, and then pick out the areas where we want to focus first, obviously downtown, because, well, now there's some missing trees. And maybe choose areas of the higher traffic or the areas where you want to attract traffic.
Plan. So were there any questions on the other sections of the ordinance?
I just wanted to point out on, was it section 3, letter D, is to select a chair and then a potential second or a vice chair. But since this is not on the agenda, is
Okay.
to suggest it be on the next agenda.
Okay.
And backing up one more for terms of office, since we're all starting from day one here, but they're talking about a 3-year staggered terms, how are we going to stagger from this point? If each of us is in for 3 years. Is there a thought about that?
That'll probably be in the next, like 3 years from now. The idea was to try to get the board up and running, and so it's just assumed that everybody was going to be having
Okay,
3 years, and then as people start to either leave for whatever reasons, or it comes up to the term, then at that point, I'm guessing that the mayor or whoever the mayor is will ask people to come back for either a 2 or a 3 year. So we
Okay.
can start to stagger it at that point.
so from 3 years from now, that
Right.
will happen,
Yeah.
basically? Okay.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense, just because it's new and to get the group, get some continuity.
Right, and
going.
there's a lot to do in this first 3 years. You're setting the foundation for the tree board in the years to come.
Certainly.
So, okay, so Lou, do you have a note of that for the?
Yes,
the vote for?
I was going to mention it
Okay, thank
at
you.
new business, but, so it'll be on the next agenda.
Yeah, and I was the mayor, since I'm on the council, said I was the chair, but I don't have to be the chair. I mean, someone else would like to be the chair, that's fine.
How about the first year, anyway?
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
Unless somebody else is itching to do it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I'm happy to start out doing it, and then we can, yeah. And, yeah, so, good, get some momentum, get some work done. So I think it's important to keep in mind that, that we don't independently have authority, that we're advisory, to
This is
to
the
Public
authority?
Works. Yes, yes.
I assume so.
Yes. To
The
Rob.
director.
Yes, yes, he's the
Herein
director.
named.
Yes,
Be
exactly.
sitting in Mike's seat.
No, I'm fine over here. This feels more comfortable.
And he has, I mean, because he does have, as a city employee, as managing the Public Works Department, he does have responsibility for maintaining public health and safety and well-being, and that's going to include pruning and removing trees as necessary. And so that doesn't have to come here. We're more, the big picture, trying to set the course for how things, how we do things with trees. Does that make sense?
Rob, how many staff do you currently
I currently have 7. One includes a mechanic and one's a park maintenance administrator, so really I only have 5. I have seasonals, and we do everything from treetops to main bottom, from curb to, or from sidewalk to sidewalk, so.
There's a training program. It's called Urban Forest Basic Training,
Mhm.
and the Arboretum designed it. It's a moving training program
Mhm.
that's designed to give public works employees that may not have a lot of background info
Sure.
about trees. It's a 2-day crash course. The first day is just kind of like tree basics and how to prune and how to plant a tree.
Mhm.
And then day 2 is chainsaw safety training.
Sure.
Um,
When's the next time that happens?
They just did it's usually in the spring and then in the fall, so it might be a little bit of a challenge just with your seasonals.
Mhm.
But I think the fall one's usually in September.
Okay.
I can email you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take any opportunities. I just attended it was good timing. I just went to a seminar at the Morton Arboretum 3 weeks ago about municipal trees and tree ordinances and all that stuff. So
CRTI.
yes,
It's the same group, it's just a different program. I do have to check the person that oversaw the program just left the Arboretum, so I hope it still happens this
Okay.
fall. But it's supposed to be, the fall one will be north, so that'll be
Okay.
somewhat helpful just to
Good.
make it closer to. Do you have a space where 50 people could be hosted? Right here?
right here.
Yeah.
That'd
Yeah.
be something that
Yeah,
might be open to.
absolutely.
We've had the mayor's caucus
has the
come
mayor's
here.
caucus
We've
been here
had,
before?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is, that's why we've referred to it as the council chamber when it's a council meeting, but otherwise it's the community room. And we can
Zumba
always pull in,
class.
well, and we
Right.
can pull in other chairs or tables as needed.
Okay. Is that something we'd be,
Absolutely.
would be interested in?
Makes it easy to get everybody trained at the same time when it's in town.
Yeah. Nice.
Do you teach that?
It's self-serving. I want
Yeah,
it
yeah.
close to home.
That's great. And so just on section 4, the authority and power, item C does describe the relationship between the tree board and the director, which I think is pretty straightforward. It's again advisory. We're in an advisory role, but I think especially at this point, given that we have a very narrow sort of track record with trees, just sort of doing the basics in the past, which involved a lot of tree removal because of, over the last couple decades, just because of the emerald ash borer and then aging trees. So, so I think we have a good opportunity to work together. And then I'll turn to the arborists and in terms of section 5, tree planting and care standards. I don't,
Well, that was pretty impressive. As an engineer, I didn't even know that ANSI actually had specifications for tree care. I'm used to that for dealing with, metallurgy, welding, things like that, but no, tree care, A300.
so that all makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the verbiage on C, the preferred species list,
Mhm.
they, in our industry, they just kind of have a term for right tree in the right place. Like it
Okay.
doesn't have to necessarily be spelled out that this is a shade tree and this is a ornamental tree. It's more that you have some control over, okay, if you're parking,
Right.
if you're planting downtown, you need to consider that. If you're planting underneath power lines, you need
Right.
to consider that. You know, if you're
Low area,
low
wet
areas,
area.
wet areas, consider this. If you're in higher, dry soils, consider these trees. So it's the same concept, but it's just a little bit, gives a little bit more flexibility of just looking at all the factors that are going to be affecting this new plant and giving it the best chance of being successful.
Makes sense.
One of the things that I would recommend putting in this section, and this even comes from an Arbor Day suggestion, is we do have 5E, which is planting trees under utility lines. However, more language for no street trees other than those species listed herein as small trees may be planted under or within 10 lateral feet of any overhead utility wire, or for our sake, over or within 5 lateral feet of any underground water line, sewer line, transmission line, or other utility. Because it is a shame when we plant trees right over infrastructure that we have to come back a couple years later and rip the tree back out. And then also spacing, distance from curbs and sidewalk. In their example, small trees 2 feet away from curb sidewalk, medium trees 3 feet, large trees 4 feet, and then just spacing of trees, things like that.
Well, and one of the things that I learned when we were putting in replacing the sidewalks, started doing that a couple of years ago, is that for what's recommended is when you're planting a new tree that's near to a sidewalk, like even in the parkway, is you can put in a barrier, a root barrier that's going to keep those roots from pushing up the sidewalk in the
Yeah.
future, which is that might be a nice thing to add.
Absolutely. I think if, realistically speaking, from a public works and infrastructure perspective, trees in the right of way are hazards for sidewalk and road conditions and debris and gutters. But if we can do anything to mitigate those issues while still keeping green space and nice canopy and shade, I'm all for it.
Kind of in the same concept, I was curious when we talked about in section 4, authority and power, about referring to a removal of trees or trimming that's threaten electrical, telephone, gas, or any. Do we directly, we or you, have control over how the utility companies come in to?
No.
That's just all on them. We have
Yeah.
no say in that. They can do whatever they want.
Generally speaking, especially if things are planted within easements, because if there's anything planted within an easement, and ComEd, if they have overhead wires, they've got an easement beneath, they'll do anything. But realistically, they'll do maintenance trimming, but a lot of it, especially with AT&T and the lower, AT&T spectrum, the lower hanging wires, until that tree limb rips it off, they're not doing anything to it.
Okay. I just didn't know if that was within our scope of, we need to say, wait, you check with us.
Well, and Joel, I don't know to what extent you're aware, but I know some communities like Trout Valley and Bull Valley have both set things up with ComEd
Yeah, they
to,
have,
yeah,
the umbrella is basically vegetation management, and that's up to the person watching it. They do their best to work with the customers and take value in what it is, but ideally, that's still a transmission source.
right.
It's a safety issue, and they don't want to do it more than once. So you'll see some things when all driven down the road, you say, why did they just do that? Why did they take the whole tree? Or why did they cut one half? There's a lot of factors to it.
Yeah.
And some of it's not all owned by the customer.
That's why sometimes you see like a U shape cut through the tree,
Yeah.
because those trees will pull static charges from the line, and then now that tree becomes a hazard. So it depends on the voltage going through, or the amperage going through, but
All kinds of
yeah,
factors.
it could be
ground
anywhere from
gradient,
3 to 6 feet from the wire.
Trees are very good conductors.
And a good source of your power outages too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind, though, is typically like ComEd or a power company will have an arborist within their fleet so that they're not just hacking the tree. But, I mean, they're going to cut for safety of the wire, but they're not supposed to cut it to where the tree is just going to die anyway. Because that too becomes a liability.
Okay. Thank you.
That's what it's
Well,
called.
I only say that because I know my last city, the electric side of it, we had an arborist on staff. So I'm making the assumption. I hope I'm not wrong.
Okay. Yeah, and then the ordinance just lays out, a prohibition against harming public trees. I have a neighbor who periodically calls me and asks, or emails me and asks if he can put copper nails in the street trees by his house to make them die.
Did you say no?
I say, well, you just told me, I said, if those trees die, you just told me you killed them, so, you might not want to do that.
Are we currently removing trees for nuisance? Like if some
Yes.
homeowner complains,
So
how are we making that decision?
visual inspection by me. There was a couple trees, we just had a sort of a rash going down West Burbank. There was a lot of aged trees that were in poor condition that had, wood ducks living in one of the old limbs. And,
Habitat.
yeah, it was, where the trees were, they were mature trees that were beyond life expectancy, or, at the end of their life expectancy, and the liability to the city with notification of the resident now becomes, I told you about it, you didn't do anything about it, now,
So that's sort of hazard mitigation.
correct. And realistic,
Since like the roots are in my sewer line, or I don't like the
Right.
seeds, or
Right.
it says bugs that I don't like.
no, the only thing we've done is, we had a street tree that was overhanging a private deck. And of course, that was a black walnut. And the resident stepped on the black walnut and slid and ended up breaking their shoulder. So, we did some limb removal in that case to sort of to bring the street tree back more to the street. But when it comes to root balls, intrusions into sanitary laterals, that, the sanitary lateral in the city of Harvard is owned by the resident from house to main. So the maintenance of the sanitary lateral is up to that person. I can't control if somebody wants to put a bunch of, glyphosate or something in the sewer line and kill the tree like that. But,
Giving them permission to remove.
no, they will need, there's trees where we've taken limbs, but it's not, like, I don't like this tree. Can you take it down? And I'll go out there and say, you know what, you may not like the tree, but it's a healthy tree. And, the conversation I had with, I had a resident call, and he said, I parked my boat and the black walnuts stained my fiberglass, and I've got a classic car, and it's just a pain, and my driveway's stained. And I said, listen, I understand that's a concern for you. How long have you lived there? And he's like, I've been here for 10 years. And I'm like, those are trees that are probably 50 years old. Those were there when you moved in. And, he's like, well, but they're really just a nuisance. And I said, but you realize that it's a nuisance for you, but if I cut those trees down or allowed you to take those trees down, I would probably have, 20 calls saying, why'd you remove these beautiful, healthy trees? And not exactly happy about it, but did understand.
So it does, section 7 does go over the adjacent owner responsibility for maintaining, and then certain trees that are declared a nuisance. And that's where the city can with a tree on private property.
Is section 7, A, saying that it is okay for people to plant trees in the parkways of their places?
Yes,
Okay, and they don't need to ask first, as long as they get
as long
these
as they're
rules
following
and-
the guidelines in here.
Yeah, I guess I never realized that was accessible
Yeah.
planting area.
It just says the owner of the land adjacent, you know, when acting within the provisions of this ordinance, so basically covering everything else, getting permission, is it on the species list, you know, is it approved? You can do whatever you want, as long as it's what we tell you to.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And I can tell you, so Tom and I have, we had a lot of honey locusts in the parkway by our house, and as they got older and just weird, because they do,
As they do.
they're not meant to be old trees. There's a couple that we've taken down and planted, you know, something else there. So, yeah, to fill in that space, because it's nice to have. And we figured, you know, since they weren't dead, it wasn't the city's responsibility to do that. But, you know, I think now, with the ordinance, if you're taking down a tree in the parkway, you would have to have permission to do that. Yeah.
And we will have to, or this body will have to establish the means in which that's communicated to me and with the guidelines for removing said trees. So, you know, is it a online form? Is it via email only, preferred? You know, because I can't take a call and say, hey, you know, we want you to evaluate my tree over here at, you know, 407 Blackman, and, you know,
Yeah.
it just can't happen. There has to
Right.
be some formality to it.
I work in Lake County, and all of the communities I work in have tree removal permits. Some charge, some don't. Some are online, some are fairly archaic still.
Right.
But completely reasonable, and definitely should have that here.
So what is the parkway? How far back from the curb on the street is considered?
Generally speaking, the parkway, you know, I think it's defined in here, but my version of the parkway would be any land between your pinned property and the street. So back of curb to your property. So in this, it defines it as the area along a public street between the curb and sidewalk, or if there is no curb or sidewalk, the unpaved portion of the area between the right-of-way and the paved portion of the street or alley. But
So people without a sidewalk, how do they know from their
there's
plot
so
of survey or something
yes,
what's
your
the
your
easement?
plat of survey? So like for your case, you know, your side yard would be parkway because that's in between what you own and the back of curb. So that would be, you know, like a parkway that the city has. And then the city has in the ordinance, like I can't remember what section, but, you know, it does talk about parkway maintenance and parkway maintenance being up to, even though it's not owned by the resident, parkway maintenance is responsibility of that resident.
That will need to be clearly stated if we're doing a tree inventory, because they'll have to be able to determine tree ownership for that.
You guys had mentioned you have properties in town that currently don't have sidewalks, never had sidewalks.
Right.
Right, like my house.
Planted a tree and what you think would be where a sidewalk would go. Where's the city on that? Is that's something that'd be a concern down the road? Or do you have that authority to say someone without one gets one? You've got vegetation or trees within that?
Well, I planted some fresh trees in the front of my house, and basically we do have a section of sidewalk a little farther down Lincoln. And I basically just stood on my lawn, and I looked down, and I kind of visualized, all right, if the sidewalk was running through my front yard, where's it going to run? So I planted the trees about 2 feet to the side of where
Closer
the
to the
sidewalk
street?
should run.
Right.
If it,
I mean, I guess if the city determines a distance,
I think that's
Sidewalk would go.
because of the varying depths and side yards and everything like that, that would definitely have to be on a approved basis. You know, I think on a tree planting request, you'd almost have to have at least one stop by or a consultation
Yeah.
with somebody from my office.
Well, and, you
Where
know,
did that-
ideally, when somebody buys their property, it's surveyed.
Mhm.
And so they should at least know, at some point, know where the corners are.
Had a sidewalk, but the city says we're putting them in with curbs.
I think
Does the city
anything,
cut the tree down if it's in the way?
It would be more on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
I mean, if a tree, if you're asking me right now for a definitive, what would honestly happen is if the tree is healthy, there's no reason to cut it down or to try to move it or burrow through it. We would probably come across to it or within so many feet of it and actually start to put a zig around it.
Yeah, go around it. Yeah.
As long as there's something so we can avoid that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, it'd be more on a case-by-case basis.
So
by
there's not too
approval
many.
moving forward,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Then you're controlling.
Right.
Where that tree goes, and if it looks like a sidewalk might go there in the future, then, but any pre-existing ones, you don't worry about it till you have to.
But if in this scenario, if the tree was deemed as dying or unhealthy, then we would probably just go ahead and remove the tree, put in the sidewalk, but then probably replace that tree on the inside where the parkway would be.
Well, and I'll give you a real-world example that happened on 14, on Division, in front of Vivi Ginsburg's house, if folks know Vivi. It's the cute green sort of bungalow. But she had two big old trees. I'm not even sure what kind they were, growing in the parkway, which is about as wide as these tables, between the curb and the sidewalk. And as part of the project to eventually, working with IDOT, to put in new sidewalks there because they're in really bad condition, they needed her permission to take out those trees. And because there wasn't a way to do the sidewalk and keep the trees. So those two trees did come down, but I talked to her about it and she said, that's fine. And
Change the look of everything.
it did.
It's
It
not
did.
far from my house. The first time I drove down the street and the trees around, like,
Yeah, because they were big.
Shocking.
Yeah, yeah. But so when they actually do the sidewalk, then at that time may put in another tree, one tree there. It's not really enough space to have two trees. But yeah. Okay. Anything else in the code? So
I mean, would you want to define penalties? Because right now it's up to 500. Would you want to do something as DBH? You know, some of the other municipalities had like a fine of like $150 per DBH, or inch at DBH, or like fines. And that's really down to what we can prove, because if somebody cuts a tree down and all that's left is a stump, it's kind of discretion on DBH.
but it's a pretty good,
There's a
that's
methodology.
yeah, there's a pretty good formula
there's-
for,
You could use the trunk formula method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to get,
Crazy with it yet?
I think you should maybe consider doing that by species, so people aren't removing desirable trees. Because they might be doing you a favor long-term, taking different, like the Norway maples down versus the oaks.
Right.
and-
I think some of the other municipalities had that defined as, nuisance trees, where nuisance trees, as part of their permit for tree removal, nuisance trees, the permit was waived.
Right.
And, and if you had a different tree, if you had a white oak, you had to have good reason, you had to pay good money. Is it healthy? You're going to pay extra money. And it was
Sometimes
really defined.
replacements are required.
Absolutely.
Right.
versus the tree of heaven that you just went out of there.
I've seen municipalities do as much as inch per inch.
Yeah.
So if you cut down a 30-inch diameter tree, you had to replace 30 inches of tree in town. And you had to pay an escrow,
Yeah, I would put a bond in,
Yeah.
yeah.
you know, until your
And then
30
That,
inches were
that becomes
replaced.
very
But then does
difficult to
that go
manage.
Yes.
onto city, like other city
Parks
properties?
and schools.
Okay.
Actually, it was done in an effort when there was a lot of, they tear a house down and build a monstrosity in
Oh,
every square
yeah.
inch of the property.
Right,
And they were losing huge amounts of canopy cover. So they had some very extreme, because if there were, the community was losing their trees.
Right.
So they wanted as quickly as possible to replace the canopy cover that was being lost. But I don't necessarily feel, you only do that if it is an issue.
right.
Like if we have an issue of people, quote unquote, illegally or, you know, removing our trees.
Yeah.
Just on the whim, then yeah, we need to do something about it. But that's not happening.
Well, one thing that I did, you know, I noticed in here is prohibition against topping. And there's a tree on 14 that, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, an oak
Or
that they
oak.
topped, that I've just been waiting for it to die.
it's not very happy these days.
No, it's just like it's horrible. It's so sad. So one of the things that occurred to me is because that's the kind of thing, that, for instance, when that was going on, when that happened, is like I came home, drove home that day, and that was done. I may have seen the tree crew there, but you don't know what they're doing. And then I come home and I'm like, oh no. And it's too late then because it's been done. So that would be another, how do we
I think
handle that?
one opportunity would be to, you know, our community doesn't have a bazillion vendors coming through town, is sharing this ordinance, sharing this with them, making them understand that
Education.
that you can't
Community.
top, you know, you can't top trees on the Parkway in Harbor.
Yeah.
You know, because we're not, are we claiming that for private property? We're not stepping into private property situations, just on
No.
the Parkway, right?
Parkways,
Only if it's to public.
right.
Because did we have the fine for that?
There's not a specific.
No, it just says not to, anything, basically any violation of this ordinance,
$500 fine would apply to topping if a,
yeah. And no more than.
so do you think that whether it's trees that are removed or trees that are topped or something, do you think there needs to be a stiffer penalty? You're the one day in, day out.
Possibly.
Dealing
So
with
I don't think we have a giant issue with this in Harvard because of our income level. You know, we don't have a lot of people just see the trees as what they are. They're not building giant, extensions under their home and mowing over every tree. Everybody just sort of appreciates what they are. But if we do run into that situation where we have somebody that cuts down a tree of value, right now we are limited to $500 and no more than.
So maybe at the next meeting, we can look at some examples from other communities of how they do their penalties. Is that?
Yeah, I think you're right. In town, there's some nice oaks on the Parkway, and somebody just decided $500 isn't.
Going to replace the value of that tree.
Okay. Other questions? Well, so Rob, so number 4 on the agenda is a report from you for your goals. So what's your feedback for
Our-
us?
My feedback for this body is just that, because this is such a new program for us and we have such aged infrastructure, the city of Harvard, as I understand it, hasn't been, we don't go out looking for trees to prune and stuff to maintain because we just have so much already. So having somebody dedicated to this or a dedicated arborist, it's going to be real tough, without additional staff and additional funding to build that out. We're dealing with storm sewers that haven't been cleaned in 40 years and crumbling infrastructure. So we are doing our best. So we're here to support this in any capacity we can, knowing that our capacity is pretty limited.
Is there going to be a budget created within the city? Should we have to go to the outside, or is that
The city
something
currently has
this-
a budget of $25,000 for tree planting and removal as defined in the Public Works budget.
Yeah, and the minimum standard for Tree City is $2 per capita per year. So we're better than that.
The council is well aware of that $2 requirement when we were going through the development of this ordinance. So at the bare minimum, the city is committed to putting at least 19,000, which is $2 per the current population. As we grow, then we have to adjust the budget upward.
And I mean, I think there will be opportunities for Harvard, funding opportunities, because of the economic status of the community. We're the only community in McHenry County that falls under the federal threshold for economic distress, which opens a lot of doors.
According
for-
to
yeah,
CRTI, our tree canopy is only 15%.
right.
15?
Oh,
15%. McHenry County's average is 19. But we are defined by agriculture, so.
Right. And when you so you must have looked at the map of the whole region, and it was like grades of, it's through the Chicago Region Trees Initiative. Here's, Lou, I'll let you look at Rob.
Yeah.
Trees. Down. When you look at the whole Chicago region and the tree canopy coverage for different communities, Harvard's a very, very pale green compared to most places. But Bull Valley, I think, is the only community in McHenry County that's dark green.
Oh.
Yeah, so,
Does the city or the board have any influence on future developments, commercial, residential, et cetera? Anything that gets developed, do you have any recommendations for those developers with the
Just when it comes
put in
to
or
tree planting.
ways to influence that?
For
Once
tree
things
planting,
get
yes.
together,
yeah.
just create what you want to see with their cooperation?
Again, just when it comes to tree planting or suggestions for trees to plant, yeah, I can see that being, I mean, your input, the board is supposed to be taking care of the trees, and guiding providing your expertise to guide in that area.
So it wouldn't be out of line to think that you could work with them on that.
One of the example languages in the Arbor Day Foundation's definition for landscaping, and something that can be added to the ordinance, is in new subdivisions or when the development of commercial property occurs, the city forester shall review landscaping plans that may require street trees to be planted in any of the streets, parking lots, parks, and other public places abutting lands henceforth developed and/or subdivided.
I think that's just one example of ways to stretch the 25,000.
Right.
Because if certain things are part of a capital project, something else is part of development, something else is,
Right.
a storm blows through and we're gonna use some FEMA money, like, now, over time, maybe we can move what percentage of that 25 is towards, like, maintenance maintenance and
Right.
prevention versus reaction.
Keep in mind too that when it comes to, let's say, a large development, you can include, you can suggest and I mean, highly recommend that as part of the project that the developer GIS any trees and then provide that GIS location. And that would be one way to help identify the tree that's been planted and exactly where it's been planted. And that'll help keep our list accurate. So things like that are very helpful.
We currently have a GIS system for other infrastructure like light poles or
We do. We are in the process of maintaining it and developing it. Right now, we have very limited maps for sanitary and fresh water. We are, tomorrow morning actually, I have a meeting set up with our GIS engineer to talk about storm sewer and get that in there. We do have, building and zoning has zoning maps, and we have the availability and the opportunity, just the time to create, add, and maintain.
The reason I bring it up is any tree inventory we use should use whatever we're going to use
Yeah,
for our
correct.
other infrastructure.
Esri, our GIS.
And that was kept in mind as we were identifying areas as far as GIS where we're lacking. One thing, and Joel, to answer your question, I just got a message from the mayor saying there is a requirement for trees on new buildings or new builds. So, thank you, Mayor.
Eye in the sky.
Hey, Mike. He's watching. Uh-oh.
So I'm guessing the concert is over.
Or he's
Or it's
watching
not.
the
Yes.
If it's not, we won't tell him.
Yeah. His daughter doesn't need to know. So, well, good. So, what are folks' thoughts in terms of a meeting schedule? I mean, anyone who knows me sort of knows that there's like no meeting I don't like. So, I'm not a good I'm not a good person to set a meeting
Mondays and
schedule.
Thursdays are definitely out,
Okay.
because those are dojo nights.
So Wednesdays, for me, Wednesdays generally are good. I generally don't have some other meeting on Wednesdays. This Wednesday seemed to work for folks. How frequently would folks, I was thinking maybe more frequently to begin with, just
Probably, so we get a handle on everything.
monthly to,
Stay on top of stuff.
okay. Is that the first Wednesday of the month?
First Wednesday of
start?
each month.
Is that, okay. So then the next meeting would be June 5th?
You say?
June 5th?
June 5th.
Wednesday, June 5th?
At 6:30, right? I'm kidding. I printed out all the agenda and everything and never looked at it. I just went from what I'd put on my calendar originally. And
And so we've talked about the election being on the agenda. Rob, you'll bring some penalty, maybe language from other,
I'll see what I can pull up.
okay. And then what other items, where do folks want to start?
One thing I'd like to throw out is, since we already missed Arbor Day, maybe some sort of event for this committee.
Okay,
In maybe October, we could do October, and track down some trees that we could volunteer to plant some.
that's a good idea.
I have prearranged with Harvard Nursery that I have 20 trees of 2-inch DBH that we will be planting in the fall.
Do we know where we're planting them?
So that right now we kind of replace what we take out,
Right,
but with suggestions of this body that may change, and then also maybe to spur some interest in it. Maybe we can do
Okay.
some sort of a, you know,
We're purchasing these trees?
yes,
Tree sponsorship.
yeah.
I'm actually
Because
thinking
I brought up
that,
the cherry thing outside of our dojo, we now needs a tree. An ornamental cherry tree outside of a Japanese dojo would be nice.
I will say that those trees will probably be replanted before Milk Day. So,
Oh, the downtown trees,
Yes.
yeah. That'll be done before we meet again,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. Regarding the downtown trees, this was brought to my attention. It precedes my time in Harvard, but I don't know if any of the rest of you might know about this. But it seems that back when they decided to plant trees along Air Street, that the plan was that they would plant the trees small trees, and then I don't know what the time frame was, but before they got too big, they would be removed and planted at Milky Way Park, and then replaced with smaller trees again to kind of keep recycling. Does that sound
Well,
familiar to
yeah,
anybody?
and that was, we talked about that,
Bejot.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I
so
know.
that
I
was-
know.
They are-
I'm sorry, you missed that.
Yeah, well, that was
So-
the one thing that somebody had told me
Yeah.
about and said, you should bring
We
this
can
up.
go over it, or you could rewatch it on YouTube.
So
Okay.
unfortunately, the trees are at Milky Way Park, but not in the original form.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a good,
They're-
yeah,
they're
it's-
Well, that
mulch.
was the thing, they just got too big before they tried to remove them.
Well, and it's not practical to actually do that.
Surface, the
Yeah.
vaulting, or
Okay.
lack of vaulting.
Okay.
And,
Again, I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, and the type of tree. I mean, they're honey locusts. So those aren't typically long-lived
Mhm.
trees.
And even digging them up and
Yeah.
try to replant them might be
Yeah.
a failure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the cost benefit.
Well, it was somebody that, when they heard I was going
Yeah.
to be on the tree board, they said, well, find out about what's going on with that.
So theoretically, and this goes to what Joel was asking about before, let's say, fast forward 15 years, 20 years, and it's time to do another streetscape. That's something where this body would be participating as far as the vault, the box that the trees have to go in, or anything like that, to make sure it's done properly. So the trees could potentially be lifted and moved to another location. But right now, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Okay, so coming up with an event?
yeah,
or-
coming up with an event, I think it should be outside of trees
Yeah,
purchased by Harvard. You know,
Okay,
This is
yeah.
more of a donation,
yeah,
find a sponsor or
Okay.
something.
yeah. And then, but maybe, I don't know if there's, if we want to start to get into the tree species list? Yeah,
I think we should.
I
okay,
think we can provide that by the next meeting.
okay.
Between Shannon and I think we work in enough communities that already have tree species lists. We can
Okay.
find a sampling
Okay,
of other communities and suggestions in the Arboretum and stuff. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel
Okay.
on this, more go
Mhm.
by what someone
Great.
else has already done and just refine that list for our
Yeah.
purposes.
okay.
I would say if
Sounds
there's
good.
any suggestions for the Air Street trees. That,
Right away.
How about cherry?
If we want to diversify from honey locust,
Correct.
I think hackberry could be a selection. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
the new disease-resistant elms. So there probably used to be American elms on the air at one point
Yeah, back in the day, probably.
back in the day.
They were
so
everywhere.
The new hybrid elms
Accolade
still
is a
work
good one.
well in those spaces. And no to tulip poplar. What about like more under?
Fort McNair.
Oh, like a red horse chestnut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even go with single stem service berries. Might struggle.
Yeah. Crab would be messy.
Crab would be messy.
Would
and
the chestnuts be messy?
Yeah, I was just about to say chestnuts on a public sidewalk.
Yeah, that's a pretty big
Maybe not the
thing.
best. I mean, they're great. I love, the little nuts they make, and they're very interesting and fun to have in your hands, but maybe not the best.
Gonna have a
Something.
sticking point,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, everything is.
No, we set up a streaming camera and we get, monetized. on
Pay-per-view,
YouTube.
yeah.
Maybe that, the other people wiping out, there might be a cost benefit.
Marmol maples are good,
Oh, yeah.
a marmol, because they're seedless.
Oh, the Miami maple, the State Street maple
It's a
would
good
probably do
one,
the trick.
too.
And that's a smaller tree, too. Swamp white oak can actually work in some urban settings.
Yeah, but usually not for a while,
There would be a certain part of me that would, okay. There'd be a certain part of me that would die if we had to cut down a white oak after a few years to get it out of there.
I would. Filbert. They have a fruit,
Turkish filbert.
Turkish filbert.
The one thing about this list we just threw out there, I think as a general concept, we should try to use natives.
Mhm.
But I think in urban,
Right.
our
It's,
filter might be a little bit different in the downtown area.
Sweet gum.
Yeah.
Black gum.
What'd you say?
No sweet on this. Spiky balls. This would really hurt.
Okay. Anything else for next month? The agenda? I think that's a pretty good,
Tree inventory,
Well-
volunteer event,
yeah, volunteer
or not
event,
inventory, tree selection.
tree
list.
selection list, event,
you said fines, you want me to bring back?
fines, the penalties, just how to structure that, what to include. What's that? Election, yes. Yes. And then, okay, anything else for the, Joel?
We'd be able to look into opportunities for any training or certification that would benefit the board and others down
Yeah.
the road.
It's a good idea. And then the Trees Forever grant is due June 1st, so that'll be before we meet. So I'm just,
It's called the Trees Forever.
Trees Forever, yeah, and it's it's Trees Forever and the Morton Arboretum both got a huge federal grant through the Inflation Reduction Act related to urban trees. And Trees Forever currently has a grant open for tree inventories for underserved and economically disadvantaged communities, up to $25,000. So, would you, Shannon, would you know who does that kind of work?
Well, I know organizations that commercially would do it.
Okay.
I also know that with some of those grants, it's actually volunteer arborists that come to do
Oh,
the inspections.
okay.
Because there's a certification process called track certification, which is how you do
Tree risk
hazard
assessment.
Yeah, determining.
hazard assessments.
Oh,
And I think one of the things that Illinois Arborist Association is doing, I don't know who's doing it, but if you can get free track certification, but then you have to donate a certain amount of your time to
Oh.
doing these inventories
Okay.
to help these underserved communities get their
Okay.
trees inventory.
okay.
Um,
So I'll check with the Trees Forever folks.
Yeah, I
And
don't
see
know.
about
I don't
that,
know
yeah.
that for certain. I just
Okay.
know that has been
Okay.
thrown out there. That on the other side, where you get this training,
Okay,
and then but the flip side is your volunteering time.
Okay.
Well, what was the June 1st event you talked about?
No, it's a deadline for a
Oh, a
grant
deadline. Oh.
program. Yeah, that, where we could get, a tree inventory funded,
Okay,
which would be a really great thing for us to have, in order to put a plan together, and would help with things like where do we put the trees? Because I can remember talking with Dave, Nelson, Lou's predecessor, and, the backlog of places where we've removed trees far exceeds the number of trees that we plant each year. And so, so having that would be kind of fun, I think, to have a priority, to be able to come up with some sort of way to make that decision and to spread the wealth around
Yep.
And publicize, what we're doing. And yeah, so Lou and Rob, so Lou, will I work with you on the grant?
Yes.
Okay,
I'll get together with Rob
okay,
for whatever I need on that as well.
okay, good, thank you. Any other? No mayor's report. Unless he's dialing in on the
No,
phone.
he hasn't said anything. He might
Okay.
have gone back to the concert.
Any new business?
So there were a couple of things I wanted to bring up as far as new business. As you can see, we have the Tree City USA. We have 2 of these signs that were given to us. We'll have to purchase 2 more. And once we receive these, I talked to Rob about at least the 2 that we currently have to put on the north and south ends of Division. So people coming in and from the north or south can see that we're Tree City USA. The 2 new ones coming in, the tentative plan right now is to put it on 173, both coming in for me, the direction. So again, we're advertising that we're Tree City USA. One thing that several communities have done, we mentioned a lot of donated trees or like Arbor Day or other activities to plant trees, is that you are allowed to put, even by our Arbor Day standards, to put this is a white oak, and then, the Latin term for it, donated by whoever. You can put little plaques like that into the base, or not into the tree, but around the tree.
Yep.
So that people see it and know it. So keep that in mind, especially when you're soliciting or potentially soliciting for donations. The other part, this is actually 2 steps here. We have a Milky Way Park concept design that with it, there's a walk path. And the preliminary, or the most current design plan actually has along the walk path a spots for trees. So this is where a selection of trees. My only selection coming from the home of Arbor Day is maybe plant like one of as many as you can, because school age kids typically have to go out. One of the typical assignments is to go and get a leaf. And then this also gives an opportunity to observe the trees and get to know them. Well,
Scouts do that too.
they do that still?
Yeah, where you
I
gotta
wasn't
collect-
sure. It's been a long time since
Yeah,
I've
you
seen
gotta
school.
collect, you
So
gotta
they're-
collect the different leaves. And
You can gain arboretum status over there, and that's another opportunity for funding.
Right, and that leads into the second part, and bear with me as I go on to Athena here. So as Lisa is aware of, one of the things I've been trying to do as a future project here is along Eastman. Let's see. Okay. So the city currently owns this piece of property. We just purchased this property, and I was, thanks to Jay Schulz, there is a strip here that the city may acquire as a donation. It is in the floodplain, which limits what we can do, and there's a lot of overgrowth there. But that could potentially be an like a walking arboretum.
And then we own the land.
Yeah, we
the
own this
wastewater
part.
plant. No, if you
Oh,
go,
sorry.
yeah,
Yep,
right there.
back here.
Yeah, so we own, it goes right into
Yeah.
the Muckler Creek, the wastewater plant.
So there's an
drains into.
opportunity for something to consider. to actually make that, through various means, make it a walking path to go through there. And what I kind of see happening, as we're trying to promote more walk paths, bike paths throughout the city, is connecting it with such a path so that, this is a stop. So, that's something to, down the road to consider. And then the last but not least, with Tree City USA, we're supposed to be getting some brochures. And we have a flag that we're going to fly up front, and I'd like to hang one. All these flags are being replaced with newer versions, including with the new city one. If this board is okay, I would like to put Tree City USA as well, so that we're advertising, our successes. But that will require ordering some more flags so we can fly one outside. So that's just a couple of things I wanted to, as I was thinking through this meeting, I wanted to bring up. But we are supposed to get some brochures, some handouts, things we can give out, and we can, the city staff already knows that we're reserving a spot up at the front of the office to make these brochures available.
Will there be an announcement in the water bills, in the mayor's note, that we've gained Tree City USA
We actually
status?
announced it at the last council meeting.
Okay.
But,
But the insert that goes out with the
Well,
water bill,
bills.
I think in this next one, I think that's possible. That's a good suggestion. And I think we can also put something like on our social media sites to promote it.
Sure. With a link of what it is, and yeah, that'd be great.
Ideally, down the road, when and I know I'm thinking way ahead here, but as you know, or if you've been monitoring the city council, there's been a lot of talk of trying to upgrade some of our stuff, including like the website. There is a potential that with a new website, we can actually have like a tree board page on there so there's plenty of links. Because again, the whole idea is to promote this
Right.
and to promote better care of trees. They do serve, again, coming from Nebraska City, one of the really nice things was waking up on a Saturday morning, sitting out on the front porch and seeing just about every variety of tree out there and listening to all the birds that were out there. So that's something that can be, in a Harvard way, brought here.
Mhm.
So I'll make note of that. Thank you.
any other new business? Motion to adjourn?
Sure.
All in favor?
Second.
Second? Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
So ends the first tree board meeting.
There's technical problems with the